Greetings everyone, and welcome back to Pep Organ. Well, we've just concluded the 2022 Pep Organ Composition Competition, and I hope that you've all enjoyed it. We've showcased some of the pieces of the competition just recently on the channel, and I'm delighted to say that in the last few days, we've reached 1,000 subscribers, and we've accumulated a total views across the channel of 100,000. This is an absolutely fantastic milestone for us, and we're really delighted that you have supported us all this way, getting to this milestone of 1,000. When we started the channel, we were only looking for about 100 views. That was our goal. Let's get 100 views so that we can at least make a video that's a bit more successful than it would be at a small concert, for example. But to reach this far is just such an honor, and we're so thankful to all of you. And now that we've just had an influx of new subscribers, I thought it'd be worth reiterating what the purpose of Pep Organ really is, because some of you may not have looked at the old videos that I've done about this. But this isn't going to be a repeat. I'm also going to talk today about why we hosted the Pep Organ Composition Competition in the first place. For those who are new to the channel, Pep Organ is about promoting music that speaks to the heart and is engaging to the listener, to the audience. Now this is quite different to a lot of music that we've, and music education that we've gone through in our lives. A lot of music education is about perfection. It's about perfecting the performance and about accuracy to the score and all sorts of other things. But what it often forgets is the main purpose of music is its oral capacity to engage and move listeners. And so what Pep Organ is trying to do is create music, share music, host these kind of competitions that is going to lead to engaging performances for you, the listener. So that's part of the reason why we held this composition competition. But there's more to it as well. First off, we believe strongly that new music, new composition is essential to the survival of our art form, of organ music and classical music in general. Because without new music, we just end up becoming a sort of museum that repeats and recycles old music and doesn't have anything new to say. And sure, I think that performers have a creative capacity to put new ideas into a composition that has already been composed, but it's not enough. I think we need new compositions to reinvigorate, to strengthen what the musical tradition is that we have, because we must remember that all these old compositions they were new at one point, and we need more of that, because if you can compose well, you can understand what music's purpose is, because we need music that engages audiences, and to do that, it's not enough just to perform. You sort of need to go beyond that and understand the structure of a piece, the harmonies that are involved, all those things that go into a musical work. You can learn it as a performer and learning it through music theory and things, but that composition element, the creation process, is really essential, and it's really important to emphasize. Of course, outside of Pep Organ, there already is a giant world, and I'm not saying that doesn't exist, of composers writing music. And a lot of it is supported by universities and by institutions. And the problem with institutions is that they're actually helping to silence a lot of the musical creativity of composers that go through it. So I have an example, just a personal example of a friend of mine who went to the university to study composition. And she told the examiners that her favorite composer was John Williams. And they, instead of celebrating her preference for John Williams, who is a perfectly great composer, I think he's one of the best of the 20th century, they criticized John Williams and called him derivative. And ultimately, they indicated that the course program, the intention of composition, was not the same as John Williams' commercial style of music. They wanted something more, what so-called artistic, modern, contemporary, experimental. And the problem with that is that there's only a small group of people who really engage with that sort of music. In terms of just, I suppose, the majority, most people are engaged in classical, traditional music, really. That's not to ignore the pop music world, but in our world that we've grown up in, classical music, we're interested in music of the past, for the majority of us. And that also shows, if that wasn't true, then the compositions that play in concert halls would not be mostly from the 18th and 19th centuries, would they? They would be mostly modern. But what we're seeing, and what has been consistent this whole time, and look at opera too, is that it's old music that gets performed all the time, new music not so much. And composers also, a lot of them who I've talked to, want to compose in a historical style, but they get discouraged from doing so because it's not modern, it's not contemporary, it's not new. And I'll get back to that point about newness, but I just wanted to point this out too, that in high school I composed a fugue for my final exam, and I got a good mark for it, I did very well. But as soon as I left high school and I went into university, I realized that style of music, fugues, Baroque style, anything historical, was not going to be appreciated anymore. And it was like entering a completely different world. So people who aren't familiar with the university system need to know this, because there really could be more composers writing beautiful music that's expressive, and not just has to be expressive in a traditional style, but wanting to write something expressive but being restricted because they're forced to write something experimental, atonal, something that doesn't communicate meaning. And that brings me to the topic of academic music. I've talked about academic music before, and I think some people take criticism about what I mean by academic music. What I think academic music is basically music that doesn't seek to emotionally engage. So it's about something else. It's about a sound rather than a meaning, an emotion. So we can talk about ambient music, experimental music. Music also can be historical, that's academic as well. Think about forms of fugues, counterpoint, technical exercises, etudes as well. A lot of etudes, of course Chopin's ones, are very expressive, but etudes can also be composed just to show off your ability to play. They can be virtuosic as well. I think that virtuosic music doesn't necessarily emotionally engage people. It can also be seen as quite, it's show-offy, right? It's showing off rather than engaging, which is the main point. That's what the point we're trying to all achieve here. I think what we should be achieving is engagement. There's nothing wrong, I'm going to say, with writing academic music. It's just that it shouldn't be entering concert halls. It shouldn't be performed live for audiences, per se, unless you're at some kind of conference about music research and composition research. So this idea about newness then, let's get back to that. So the end goal of composition these days, and I've heard it myself, is that you need to write something that's new. The problem with this is that it's the wrong goal to be searching for. Of course, Beethoven was one of the first composers, one of the major composers to create a shift in the way that people thought about music. And his novelty of ideas and of expression was absolutely groundbreaking for the time. But Beethoven's music wasn't new for the sake of being new. It was new for the sake of expanding musical expression. And that's when I actually agree that we should have new music. If we can expand musical expression in some way, or we can create better melodies, or something that actually can take music to a next level. But not to a next level as in losing emotional engagement and becoming rigid, mechanical, experimental, but really trying to advance exactly the way that our forebears did, Mendelssohn, Elgar, Debussy. They were trying to expand melody, harmony in ways to engage the audience, not just to be new, but to be more expressive. Debussy himself was criticized for his experimental impressionist style, but the point was he wasn't rejected because ultimately it was expressive music, and the audiences knew that, and that's why they appreciated him over the years, once they got used to the music. Now, I wanted to touch on a point which was said first to me by an old mentor of mine who recently passed away, Gary Watson, who taught gamelan at the Sydney Conservatorium. He was asked the question, if you compose a piece in the style of Bach, or in a romantic style, what value does that actually bring to the world? And couldn't that piece have been written back then in the 18th or 19th century? And he gave an answer, which I want to repeat to you now. He said that it would be impossible for me to write a piece back in the 18th century, because I didn't exist back then. In other words, even if I'm writing a piece that's exactly in the style of Bach, the point is that I'm not Bach, I'm writing it now, and so the piece couldn't have existed back then. And there are even going to be subtleties which will make it distinctively my piece instead of Bach's, which I can't escape, no matter how hard I try. And I think that that's something we should all remember. It doesn't matter if you compose a piece that's so-called derivative, just like I guess John Williams was a bit derivative of his composers that he was inspired by. That's still new in a sense, because it's coming from a place of new talent, new blood, and it's bringing something that we haven't heard before. And that might be in the form of a new melody, a new use of a harmony, a sort of different counterpoint. You can also, being from the 21st century, you don't have to limit yourself to that. You can combine genres. You could write a Baroque piece with romantic sensibilities. You could write a Renaissance style piece but use 20th century harmonies, as has been done by people before. And I think that there's so much potential there that we're not utilizing. And it's because we're not thinking enough about expression, ultimately. We can use any sort of genre that we want. And these genres are tried and true. A historical Baroque style, tried and true. People are going to concerts, still want to hear Bach. Bach is constantly being performed, as well as Vivaldi and all those other great composers. So there's still so much opportunity there to write something that contributes even more to that. I am perhaps of a controversial view. I don't think that Mozart's music can't be surpassed. I absolutely believe that a great composer could show up one day and write a better sonata than him, or a better symphony. I really don't believe that any composer can't be surpassed. And I think that because I think that music hasn't reached its zenith yet. It can continue to grow. And things like this competition are there to foster that, to encourage people to write music that could surpass the past and create something new and beautiful as well, and more expressive. And I think that we need to have this sort of thing. We need to have support for people to write in this style that is expressive. Now, I quickly wanted to discuss the topic of musical criticism before I finish, because this has been a point of debate, and there is some heated discussion underlying the idea of musical criticism, but I wanted to just say what I think about it. The question is, should we be critical of other composers' work? My feeling is yes, absolutely, because without criticism, we can't really grow, can we? We can learn on our own, but we need those steps along the way. And that can come from teachers, but as I've said, a lot of teachers are very modern, contemporary now. So we need it from not teachers especially, but also from the audience, from you, the listeners, that you have the power to actually give feedback. And I think that people will listen to it. I know that I'll listen to it if I write a piece and you don't like it. We may have a suggestion. It's always worth considering, maybe not for that piece, but for a future piece. Someone said to me recently, because I'd recently composed a work for an orchestra, and he said, "What do you think about it?" And I said, "That's not important. It's what you think about it, because you're playing it." And he said, and he had nothing to say. And I think that this is endemic of a real problem in our society, especially the classical world, which is that everyone thinks that it's all about the individual. The composer takes supreme control over the work, and no one else can have an opinion about it. I strongly disagree. I think that we are audiences, we're participants in this musical journey, because you're the listener. It's not just about the piece of music that's written on the page, it's about how we communicate. So if you communicate that you don't like a piece, that gives us signals that are really useful. And I don't think that I can judge my own work. Well, I think I can judge it, but I think that I need people to judge it as well. Otherwise, I have nothing to compare it to. I know it sounds harsh, but you can criticize other people's work. Be polite about it. If you feel that you're being too harsh, it's good. It's okay to be polite about it. But there are things that really irk me in the classical world. And one example is you may have gone to a concert recently, and there might be a modern piece, and everyone just applauds at the end. If you really don't like the piece, the least you could do is just not applaud. Because applause is showing that you agree and you support whatever was just produced and performed. And sure, you can be applauding because you're supporting that the performers played it well, but it's not enough. We know that applause is really about congratulating a composer at that moment and about the piece itself. It's a judgment of the work. So a lack of applause can at least be an indicator. See, the thing is, composers are so sheltered, especially in institutions, from criticism. And we have to just do just our little part to show that, no, we do have an opinion here. The audiences do matter. And otherwise, we're just going to be completely silent. And that's really disempowering for us and for you, who are the subscribers. I'm one person, but there are thousands of you. And I think that your collective opinions mean a lot. So do keep that in mind. I'm always happy to take criticism and feedback. With that said, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that you understand better what we're trying to do here on Pep Organ. If you haven't met me yet, I'm Titus, and I work with my wife Kim, who does the video work. And we're trying to create a channel that really speaks to the heart and does something a little bit different on YouTube. And I want to say that we're not doing this for fame or prestige either. I genuinely want to see beautiful music being composed, and that's why we're doing these competitions. It was a real joy for me to see people actually write music, and I hope that in the future we'll have even more submissions, because I think we'll be doing a composition competition next year as well. I'm optimistic, and I think that we can create a really great world, and people who don't know about the organ can come to Pep Organ and discover that we actually have new music being composed, and we have a wonderful tradition as well, because I'm also going to be playing music from popular composers and obscure composers, pieces that you probably never heard before, and you can go back to my channel and watch some of those as well. I encourage you to do that. For now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.